The muffled voice of her husband came from the other side of the bedroom wall, and the woman couldn't help but hear him whisper into the phone, "Take it all. She's got over 120,000 in there." He was giving his own mother the PIN to his wife's debit card, completely unaware that she was wide awake. But instead of panic or tears, a barely noticeable smile touched the woman's face. She calmly closed her eyes and continued to lie still. "Hello, dear listeners. I'm pleased to welcome you to my channel and present you with a new intriguing story. Enjoy listening." Kiana Jenkins never considered herself suspicious, just observant. In her 37 years of life, she had learned one simple truth. People lie not with their words but with their eyes and their hands. And with those tiny little pauses, when a question is asked and the answer has to be invented on the spot. Darius had been lying almost constantly for the past 2 weeks. She first noticed it that morning when he brought her coffee. In bed just because on a Wednesday, Kiana opened her eyes, saw her husband with the mug in his hand, and felt something inside her tighten like a guitar string. Darius never brought her coffee in bed, not even during the first year of their marriage, when they were still playing the part of lovers. The most he would do was grumble from the doorway. "Get up. I boiled the kettle." "Why are you up so early?" she asked, propping herself up on her elbows. He smiled too wide. "Oh, I slept great. I wanted to surprise you." That momentary, barely perceptible pause before he said surprise was what gave him away. Kiana took the mug and sipped the coffee. It was sweet, even though she hadn't taken sugar in her coffee in about 5 years. "Thank you," she said. "It's delicious." He left for the kitchen, whistling something cheerful, and Kiana remained sitting, looking out the window. Outside, a fine October drizzle was falling, gray and tiresome, just like her growing anxiety. At work, she tried all day to focus on the numbers. Accounting was a refuge for those who didn't want to think about life. Columns, spreadsheets, reconciliation reports. The main thing was not to get distracted, but her thoughts kept buzzing around her like persistent flies. Darius was acting strange. Not just strange, but suspicious. He had become overly attentive, overly caring. It was unusual and felt more unsettling than if he had simply been rude or hostile. On Friday, he bought her flowers, a big bouquet of white and yellow blooms wrapped in crinkly film just because. Kiana took the bouquet, thanked him, and went to find a vase. Her hands were shaking. In their 5 years together, Darius had only bought her flowers twice, on her birthday and sometimes on Mother's Day, and even that was inconsistent. "Do you like them?" he asked, peeking into the kitchen. "Very much," she replied, trimming the stems with scissors. "They're beautiful." He stood in the doorway, his hands shoved into his jeans pockets, looking at her as if he wanted to say something, but he didn't. He just nodded and walked into the living room. Kiana set the vase on the windowsill and wiped her hands on a towel. Something was brewing. She felt it with her skin, her nerves, that ancient female instinct that never lied. By evening, Darius started asking questions. They were sitting in the kitchen. She was warming up dinner while he scrolled on his phone. Suddenly, without looking up, he said, "Hey, how much have you saved up for the renovation?" Kiana froze with the ladle in her hand. "Why do you ask?" "Just curious. You wanted to redo the kitchen, right? Do you have enough money?" She slowly ladled the soup into their bowls. "Yes, I have enough." "You sure? Maybe it's better to save a little more." "Don't rush it." Kiana sat across from him and picked up her spoon. "Darius, I've been saving for 3 years. I have enough." He nodded, but it was clear her answer didn't satisfy him. He was expecting something else. "Numbers, maybe specifics." "And how much is there in total?" he asked, as if casually, in the account. She looked him in the eye. "Enough?" He offered a tense, strained laugh. Okay. If you don't want to say, don't. I just wanted to know in case you needed help." "Help? From Darius, who hadn't offered to chip in for groceries even once in their 5 years of marriage. Kiana finished her soup in silence. Everything inside her went cold, but her face remained calm. That was her greatest talent, never showing what was happening inside. Money. So, it was about the money.
She did have a
significant amount in her account, over $120,000. It was an inheritance from her grandmother, Ruby, the only person who had ever truly loved Kiana. No conditions attached. Her grandmother had passed away 2 years ago, leaving her a small condo and her savings. Kiana sold the condo, added the money to her own savings, and decided to slowly set it aside for the kitchen renovation, maybe a vacation or just a rainy day fund. Darius knew about the inheritance. 2 years ago, he'd even tried to suggest she invest the money in some friend's business venture. Kiana refused, gently, but firmly. Since then, the topic of money hadn't come up between them until this week. On Saturday, Darius started taking an interest in her purse. At first, it was subtle, like, your phone wasn't ringing, was it? Then he rummaged around looking for a charger, claiming his cord was broken. Kiana watched as he quickly glanced at her wallet lying on the dresser. On Sunday, he asked if she wanted to open a joint bank account. It's easier that way, he
argued.
We can save together, spend together. We're family, Kiki.
Kiana
Stood at the mirror, braiding her hair, and looked at his reflection. He was sitting on the edge of the bed, just as sweet and caring and lying so badly, it was awkward to watch.
fine.
With my own account, she replied calmly. I'm used to it. He frowned. That's silly. We've been together for so many years, and you still act like a stranger. I'm not a stranger. I'm just used to managing my own money. He didn't press it, but he was moody and dark all day. Kiana thought, remembered, and analyzed. 5 years ago, she'd married Darius almost by chance. He was charming, easygoing, and knew how to say the right things at the right time. She was tired of being alone. She was 32, and everyone around her was saying, it's time, it's time, it's time.
So she gave in.
The first year was tolerable. Not bliss, but not hell either. Just ordinary life.
He
worked as a warehouse manager for some distribution company. She managed the accounts for a local construction firm. They watched TV series in the evenings and went to his mother's weekend place about 15 miles out of town on the weekends. Miss Patricia Sterling, her mother-in-law, she was the true engine of all the problems in their marriage. She appeared in their lives with alarming regularity. 1 minute she needed help with her property taxes. The next she needed to borrow money for prescription costs, or she just needed to come over and sit because she was lonely. Kiana endured it. At first out of politeness, then out of habit. Miss Sterling was an imposing woman, tall, substantial, with neatly styled hair and a perpetually displeased expression.
She
felt the world owed her. Darius owed her, and her daughter-in-law certainly owed her, too. 2 years ago, when Kiana got the inheritance, the mother-in-law suddenly became especially sweet. She would bring over pastries, ask about her health, and even offer compliments. Kiana wasn't fooled. She saw how Sterling looked at her new purse, the updated furniture, and her latest model phone. Back then, the mother-in-law would drop hints how nice it would be to help a poor senior citizen, how small her Social Security check was, and how expensive life had gotten. Kiana would nod, sympathize, but never gave her money. Miss Sterling took offense and didn't call for 3 months. Now, apparently, she decided to operate through her son. Kiana went to bed late. Darius was already snoring, sprawled out over half the bed. She lay there staring at the ceiling and knew something big was about to happen. A strange calm grew inside her. Not fear, not panic, just a profound stillness. It was cold and hard like ice. She had learned this in childhood when her parents drank and screamed at each other until they were. She learned not to show emotion, not to scream back, just to wait until the storm passed, and then do what was necessary. A new storm was approaching now, and Kiana knew, I need to be ready. The next day, she got up early, dressed, and left the apartment without waking her husband. It was chilly outside, the wind whipping the hem of her gray jacket. She walked quickly, almost on autopilot. The local branch of the Midwest Trust Bank opened exactly at 9 o'clock. Kiana was third in line. A young teller with a tired face listened to her request and nodded. Yes, we can change your PIN. Of course, that's quick. And can I add one more service?
Kiana asked.
I need a notification to be sent to the security department if anyone attempts to withdraw a large sum. The teller looked at her carefully. Are you worried about fraud? Something like that. 20 minutes later, everything was done. The PIN on her main account card where the $120,000 lay was changed. The old PIN 3806 remained on her spare card, the one with exactly $3 on it. Kiana had set it up years ago for small, quick purchases, but had long since stopped using it. Now, that card might come in handy. Kiana left the bank and paused on the steps, breathing in the cold air. People were rushing to work, dragging shopping bags. An ordinary morning in an ordinary city. But inside her, everything had
Changed.
She was ready. That evening, Darius started the conversation about money again, this time more carefully, avoiding sharp corners. Hey, have you thought about opening a CD? He asked, poking his fork at his pasta. The interest rates are good. It's a smart
Move.
Kiana shrugged. I thought about it, but I haven't decided yet. What if the card gets stolen, or the account is hacked? There are so many scams these days, she smirked. They won't steal it. What makes you so confident? Because Darius, your mother is going to try to steal it, she wanted to say. But she kept silent, only looking at him with a long, calm gaze. He was the first to look away. The night was quiet. Kiana lay listening to the trees rustling outside the window and a distant car horn. Darius's breathing was steady, almost silent.
She
Knew he wasn't asleep. She felt it, and she knew that everything would change very soon, because in 5 years of marriage, she had learned to read him, not just through his eyes and tone. She had learned to anticipate, and the premonition now was so clear. She wanted to laugh. Well, let them try. She would.
Wait.
The morning started with a phone call. Kiana had just gotten out of the shower when she heard Darius's phone ringing in the entryway. He grabbed the receiver quickly, too quickly, and his voice sounded guarded. Yeah, Mom.
Hey.
Kiana wrapped herself in her robe and listened. The walls in their modest apartment building were thin. You could hear almost everything. Today, I don't know. Darius went silent, apparently listening to his mother.
Okay, fine.
Come around 6 o'clock. Kiana stepped out of the bathroom, drying her hair with a towel. Darius stood by the mirror, buttoning his shirt, pretending not to notice her gaze. Your mother is coming over, she asked calmly. He shrugged.
Yeah, she
Wants to talk about some of her business. I see. She walked into the kitchen and put the kettle on. Her hands were steady, but inside everything was wound into a tight knot. So it begins. At work, Kiana tried to concentrate on the reports, but her thoughts kept scattering. She pictured opening the door that evening and seeing her mother-in-law with her fake smile and that particular look, greedy, assessing. Miss Sterling was skilled at playing the victim. A poor, lonely woman abandoned by everyone except her beloved son. In reality, she had a decent social security check, a paid-off one-bedroom condo, and perfectly healthy legs that didn't require dragging Darius to her weekend place every Saturday. But Darius believed her, or pretended to.
Kiana
Closed another file full of numbers and leaned back in her chair. Outside the window, she could see gray rooftops, bare tree branches, and the color of old asphalt. A dull October day, one of thousands. Only this day was special. She felt it in every cell. Kiana got Home exactly at 6 o'clock. She climbed the 4 flights of stairs, unlocked the door, and immediately heard voices. Darius and his mother were sitting in the kitchen drinking tea. A box of store-bought chocolate cream puffs sat on the table, sticky and sickeningly sweet. "Oh, Kiki, come in."
Come in.
Miss Sterling waved her hand as if inviting her into her own home. "Darius and I are having some tea. Join us." Kiana took off her jacket, hung it up, and walked into the kitchen. Her mother-in-law was dressed to the nines. A light blouse, dark slacks, hair set in neat waves, and a fresh, subtle beige manicure. The classic 60-year-old woman who takes care of herself and wants everyone to notice. "Hello, Miss Sterling."
Kiana sat down on
the edge of a chair and poured herself tea from the teapot. "How are you, dear?" Her mother-in-law was smiling, but her eyes were cold and scrutinizing. "Working a lot. Tired as usual." "Oh, your work is so stressful. Numbers, reports. I'd go crazy." Sterling took a bite of a cream puff and dabbed her lips with a napkin. "Darius says you're planning to redo the kitchen." Kiona met her gaze.
I,
"It's probably expensive, isn't it? Everything's so pricey now. Cabinets, appliances. It's just awful." "I'll manage." Sterling shook her head with the air of a life expert. "That's good, of course, but Kiki, maybe you shouldn't rush it. The money sitting in the account is a good thing. A cushion. And the kitchen is fine as it is. It can
wait.
There it is. It's starting." Kiana slowly stirred the sugar in her tea.
I
"Don't like the kitchen. I want to update it." "Well, I understand that." Her mother-in-law leaned closer, and the scent of cheap floral perfume wafted from her. "But think about it. What if you need the money for something more important? Medical treatment, for example, or something else?" Darius sat silently, looking into his cup. His face was strained, as if he expected an explosion. "If I need it, I'll use it," Kiona replied evenly.
but
"I haven't needed it yet." Sterling sighed so theatrically it deserved applause. "I, for example, saved all my life, penny by penny, and what happened? Now I'm retired, barely making ends meet. Utilities are expensive. Medication is expensive. At least Darius helps out." Kiana raised an eyebrow. "He helps out?" Darius flinched. "Well, sometimes I slip her some cash, bring her groceries." Kiana nodded. "Interesting." She thought that about $500 a month at most went to her mother-in-law from their family budget. Apparently, Darius was helping her with his own personal money, which, judging by his constant debts to Kiana, he didn't
have.
"I've been thinking," Miss Sterling continued, examining her nails. "Maybe I should sell my condo. My one-bedroom downtown must be worth a lot. I could sell it, buy something smaller on the outskirts, and live on the difference." Kiana sipped her tea. It was hot, scalding her lips. "Not a bad idea." Her mother-in-law looked up sharply. "Do you really think so?" "Of course. If you need money, that's the logical option." Miss Sterling went quiet, clearly expecting something else. Then she smiled, but the smile was crooked. "Yes, I guess so, for now. Maybe I don't have to sell it. Maybe there's another
way."
She stopped talking, staring at Kiana expectantly. Darius was watching, too. Both were waiting for the daughter-in-law to offer to help. Herself to say, "Don't sell it. Here is some money. Live in peace."
Kiana
finished her tea and stood up. "I'm going to change clothes." Long day, she left the kitchen, feeling their two gazes on her back, one bewildered and one angry. In the bedroom, she closed the door and sat on the edge of the bed. Her hands were slightly trembling, not from fear, but from cold, quiet, grinding rage. They wanted her money. It was obvious. Ms. Sterling hadn't come for tea. She came to scope out the situation, to see if her daughter-in-law would succumb to pity, and Darius wasn't on it, sitting right there, silent, waiting.
Kiana
Listened closely. Voices started up again in the kitchen, quieter now, muffled. She got up, went to the door, and cracked it open a sliver. The words reached her in fragments.
She won't see.
She's greedy.
Mom, don't say that.
She's just cautious. Cautious? She has $100,000 just sitting there, and I'm rotting away on Social Security. Quiet. She'll hear. Let her hear.
I
Raised you by myself. Your father left when you were 3. I worked 2 jobs, and now you marry this cold piece of work, and you can't even help me properly. Darius mumbled something unintelligible. We have to act, Miss Sterling hissed. Do you understand? Otherwise, we won't get anything.
She's not stupid.
Look how she twisted things.
Sell your condo, she says.
Easy for her to say. She has everything. So, what are you suggesting? A pause. Kiana held her breath. I was thinking maybe you can get the pin for her card. You have access to her purse, right?
Check it.
The card is in there. Then I'll withdraw the money quickly tonight before she even notices. And in the morning, we'll say the card was stolen on the bus or at the grocery store, for example. Silence so thick that Kiana could hear her own heart beating. Are you serious? Darius's voice was tense, but not indignant. More like intrigued. Absolutely. Listen, she won't even notice right away. It's not like she keeps tabs on it. She's got over 120,000. What's the big deal if we take some? We'll split it later. Half for you, half for me. That's fair, right? Another pause. I don't know, Mom. That's risky. Risky? What risk? She won't even figure it out. And if she does, so what? You'll say you didn't know anything. A hacker compromised the account. That happens all the time. Now, what if she calls the bank?
So what?
The bank will shrug. Security failure, but the card was on her. No one but her knew the PIN. She'll blame herself for not being careful. Trust me, it'll be fine. Kiana slowly closed the door. Everything inside had frozen solid. She wasn't surprised. For some reason, she wasn't surprised at all. She knew Miss Sterling was capable of a lot, but for Darius to support it, that was a punch, not a hard one but precise. She returned to the bed, sat down, and folded her hands in her lap. She needed to think, weigh her options, decide what to do next, but the decision had essentially been made already.
That
morning when she walked out of the bank, Kiana smiled faintly, barely noticeably. Let them try. About 10 minutes later, she left the bedroom. No one was in the
kitchen.
Sterling was in the entryway putting on her jacket. Darius was helping her zip it up. You're leaving already, Miss Sterling? Kiana asked, leaning against the door frame. Her mother-in-law turned around. Her face was tight, unwelcoming. Yes, I have things to do. Thanks for the tea. Thank you for the cream puffs, Kiana replied politely. Miss Sterling nodded, adjusted her jacket, and headed for the door. Right at the exit, she turned around. Kiki, think about what I said. Family is important. We have to help each other. Kiana looked her straight in the eye. Of course, I'll be sure to think about it. The door closed. Darius went back to the living room, turned on the TV, and sat on the couch. Kiana followed him, picked up the dirty mugs from the table, and carried them to the sink. Listen, Darius started without turning his head. Mom is really in a difficult spot. Maybe we should help her out after all. Just a little, like $5,000. Kiana washed the mug and placed it on the drying rack. Why does she need $5,000? He shrugged. To live on, to have some peace of mind. Darius, your mother has Social Security, and she has her condo. If she truly needs money, she can sell her condo like she said herself or find a part-time job. At her age, Kiana turned around, wiping her hands on a towel. She's 62. Plenty of women her age are working. Darius frowned. You've gotten so cold. Not cold, realistic. He didn't answer. They spent the rest of the evening in strained silence. Kiana read a book. Darius watched some reality show on TV. Before bed, he went into the bathroom, splashed around for a while, then came out, lay down, and buried his face in his phone. Kiana closed her book and lay down next to him. The darkness was thick. The wind rustled outside the window. She heard Darius fidgeting under the blanket, typing something on his keyboard. He was probably texting his mother, planning. Kiana turned on her side, facing the wall. Inside, she was surprisingly calm, almost indifferent. 5 years of marriage, it turned out, could be wiped out by one conversation in the kitchen, one decision to steal a wife's money, and conspiracy with his mother. She remembered how they met. A typical story. Mutual friends, a party talking. Until morning. Darius seemed interesting then, vibrant. He joked, told stories, and knew how to listen. Then came the flowers, the walks, the first kiss in the rain.
Romancy.
The wedding was modest. Kiana insisted on it. She didn't want the grandeur, the guests, the debt from the banquet. Darius easily agreed, saying the main thing was being together, not putting on a show. Good words. Too bad they were
Empty.
The next day, Kiana got up early. Darius was still sleeping, taking up the whole bed. She dressed quietly, took her purse, and left the apartment.
It was
cool outside, smelling of wet leaves and someone's chimney smoke.
Kiana walked
Slowly, thinking over her plan. The card with the $3 was in her wallet. The old PIN 3806 was still active on it. Darius knew it. About 3 years ago she had asked him to take money out of an ATM for her, because she couldn't get away from work. He did it, and brought the
cash.
She hadn't worried then that he might remember the PIN. Now that was to her advantage. Her main card was in a different section of the wallet. Its PIN was new, different. Darius didn't know it and wouldn't find out. Kiana went into the grocery store, bought bread, milk, and eggs, then stepped outside and stood by the pharmacy window, looking at the vitamin ads. Life went on. People rushed to their jobs. Buses rattled at the stops. A crowed in the distance.
An
ordinary day. She returned home around noon. Darius was sitting in the kitchen, drinking coffee and looking out the window. When she walked in, he spun around sharply. "Where were you?"
At the store.
Kiana put the bag on the counter. "We were out of groceries." He nodded, but his eyes were suspicious. "Hey, you haven't changed your card recently, have you? The PIN or anything?" Kiana took the milk out of the bag and put it in the fridge.
No. Why?
"Oh, just wondering. Maybe you should for security." "I don't see the point. Everything's fine with mine." He paused, then stood up and left the kitchen. Kiana heard him pacing around the apartment looking for something, then silence again.
In the
evening, he went out saying he needed to meet a friend to discuss work issues. Kiana didn't ask any questions, just nodded and wished him a good night. She was finally alone. She sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the street. The street lights had come on, casting yellow patches on the pavement. The wind chased fallen leaves across the sidewalk. It was beautiful, really.
Fall
had always been her favorite time of year. Kiana thought of grandmother Ruby. She had a gift for finding beauty in simple things. A cup of tea with honey, an old book with yellowed pages, the evening stillness. She used to say, "Kiki, remember this. People come and go, but you stay with yourself. So take care of yourself and don't let anyone stomp on what's inside." Back then, Kiana nodded without truly understanding. Now she understood perfectly. Darius returned late, around 11 o'clock. He smelled of cigarettes and cold air, went to the bathroom, washed up, and went to bed silently. Kiana lay down, too, pulled the blanket up to her chin, and closed her eyes. Everything inside her was prepared, tight like a bowstring before release. All she had to do was wait. Wait for them to take the first step, the final step, the one after which there would be no turning back. Kiana smiled in the darkness. She wondered what they would feel when they realized the truth. Fear, anger, shame. Probably anger. Shame was for people with a conscience. She turned onto her side and closed her eyes. Tomorrow would be a new day, and the day after that, maybe everything would end. Or perhaps only just begin. Kiana woke up to silence, a strange, thick, almost ringing silence.
It was
Dark outside the window. The clock on the nightstand showed half midnight. She lay motionless, listening to her own breathing and to what was happening right next to her. Darius was awake.
she.
Felt it with her whole body, every nerve. He lay still, but his breathing was uneven, weary, not like he was sleeping. The minutes stretched into
Hours.
Kiana didn't move, keeping her eyes closed. Everything inside clenched, in anticipation. Now something is going to happen now. And it did. Darius carefully, almost soundlessly, pushed the blanket aside. The bed creaked slightly under his weight. He froze, apparently checking if she had woken up. Kiana breathed, steadily, deeply, finding sleep. He got up, walked to the door, and quietly closed it behind him. Footsteps in the hall, the squeak of a floorboard, the click of the bathroom lock. Kiana opened her eyes. The darkness was dense, but she could distinguish the outlines of the furniture, the window, the dresser, the walls. Her heart was beating steadily, almost calmly, but her hands trembled slightly as she raised them and clenched them into fists. A muffled voice came from the bathroom. Darius was speaking softly in a half-whisper, but the walls were thin, very thin.
Mom,
You ready? A pause. He was listening to Miss Sterling's reply. Write down the
PIN.
3806. The card is in her purse. The black Midwest Trust one. Take it all.
She's
Got over 120,000 in there. Kiana closed her eyes. There it was. The exact thing she had been waiting for. Now, in this moment, everything was decided finally. There was no more doubt, hesitation, or pity. Only cold, clear certainty. Just tonight, so she doesn't have time to block it in the morning. Darius continued. I'll tell her tomorrow that the card was stolen on the bus. We'll split it 50/50ths.
deal.
Another pause. Then he muttered a short, "Go get him."
Click.
The conversation was over.
Kiana
Lay there staring at the ceiling. Inside, it was surprisingly quiet.
No.
Pain, no disappointment, just a faint, almost ironic curiosity about what they would feel when everything went wrong. Darius returned a couple of minutes later, lay down carefully, pulled up the blanket, and breathed unevenly, nervously. He was clearly anxious.
Kiana
Smiled in the darkness. Don't worry, you'll be much more anxious soon.
she.
Turned onto her side, getting comfortable. She didn't want to sleep, but she had to pretend. She closed her eyes, relaxed her shoulders, and slowed her breathing. Let him think she hadn't heard anything. Let him hope.
Time crawled by.
Kiana listened to the dripping faucet behind the wall, the wind whistling in the window frame, and Darius tossing and turning under the blanket. He clearly couldn't fall asleep. He was probably running the plan through his head, imagining his mother withdrawing the money, how they would split the spoils, and how he would pretend to be shocked and outraged tomorrow. Kiki, the card was stolen. Scammers, we need to call the bank immediately. A pathetic performance, but they apparently believed it would work. About 30 or 40 minutes passed.
Kiana was
Starting to drift off for real when Darius's phone suddenly vibrated fiercely on the nightstand. He jumped as if he'd been stung, grabbed the phone, and stared at the screen. Even in the dark, Kiana could see his face turn pale, almost gray. The screen showed Mom. The message was long. The text flashed, but Kiana clearly saw the beginning. Son, she knew everything. Darius froze. Then he quickly turned and looked at his wife. She lay motionless, eyes closed, breathing evenly and deeply. He stared for 10 seconds, then sprang out of bed and rushed out of the bedroom, leaving the door ajar. Kiana opened her eyes. The hall light came on. She heard Darius pacing frantically around the apartment, muttering something under his breath, then the click of a lighter, the smell of cigarette smoke. He was smoking right in the apartment, even though he always went out onto the small balcony. She got up, put on her robe, and went into the hallway. Darius stood by the window, holding the phone in one hand and a lit cigarette in the other. His face was pale. Drops of sweat glistened on his forehead. "What happened?" Kiana asked, calmly, leaning against the door frame. He flinched, turning around sharply. "Nothing. Everything's fine." "It doesn't look fine. You're pale and smoking indoors." He swallowed, looking away.
Mom.
Texted. "She's having trouble." "What kind of trouble?"
A pause.
Darius took a drag, exhaled the smoke out the window. "I don't know exactly. Something with the
Bank.
She went to the ATM, tried to withdraw money, and they blocked the card and called security." "I don't understand what's going on." Kiana walked closer, looking at him intently. "That's odd. Why did she go to the ATM late at night?" "How should I know? Maybe she needed cash urgently." Darius nervously extinguished the cigarette on the windowsill. "Kiki, I don't know. She wrote that it was a misunderstanding that they accused her of attempted fraud." "It's nonsense."
Kiana.
Nodded.
I see.
"And whose card was she trying to use?" He froze, looking at her with a long, scrutinizing gaze. Something flashed in his eyes. Fear, suspicion,
Despair.
hers probably. "Whose else?" "I don't know."
You know best.
The silence stretched on. They stood facing each other, and the air between them was so thick it could be cut with a knife.
I
"Don't know anything." Darius finally choked out. "Absolutely nothing. It's some kind of mistake." Kiana smirked.
A
"Mistake, of course." She turned and headed for the kitchen. She turned on the light and put the kettle on. Her hands were calm and steady. Darius followed her, stopping by the table. "Kiki," he began cautiously. "Did you by any chance change the pin on your card?" She turned around, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, I did day before yesterday."
Why?
His face fell.
Why?
"For security. You were the one who said we need to be careful. So, I decided to protect myself." He was silent. Kiana saw him frantically, trying to figure out what had gone wrong. The kettle boiled. She poured water into a mug and dropped in a tea.
Big.
"And I left the old pin on my other card," she continued calmly, stirring her.
Da.
"The spare one. It only has $3 on it, but the card is active." Darius turned even paler. $3.
Nathan.
"But the card is linked to the bank security service. You know that thing? If someone tries to withdraw a large sum, the bank immediately blocks the operation and calls security."
Convenient, right?
Silence. It was so heavy that she wanted to open the window and let in some fresh air. Darius stood with his mouth agape, looking at her as if she were a ghost. Then he swallowed and ran a hand over his face. Did you do that on purpose?" Kiana sipped her tea. "Of course, I did it on purpose."
Did you?
"Think I didn't hear your conversation with your mother in the kitchen about getting the pin and withdrawing the money?" He backed away as if she had struck him. It's not what you think." "It's not." Kiana smiled sadly. "Darius, I heard every single word. Your brilliant plan to steal my money, split it 50-50, and blame it on scammers. Clever plan. I'll give you that." He tried to say something, but his voice broke. "Kiki, Mom came up with it. I was against it, honestly. She just pressured me, saying she had nothing to live on, saying you were greedy." "Stop."
Kiana.
Raised her hand. "Don't try to pin everything on your mother. You agreed to.
It.
You just dictated the pin to her half an hour ago. I heard everything, so don't lie." Darius slumped into a chair, burying his head in his hands. "God, what's going to happen now? What's going to happen now?" Kiana finished her tea and put the mug in the sink. "Now your mother is sitting at the bank explaining to the security service why she was trying to withdraw over $100,000 from someone else's card. They might transfer the case to the police if they want to. It depends on whether I file a report. He looked up quickly. You won't file.
1.
Please don't. That's Mom. They'll arrest her. Kiana looked at him for a long scrutinizing moment. There he sat, pathetic and scared, begging for mercy for his mom, the same person who had tried to clean out his wife an hour earlier. I don't know, she said finally.
I
Haven't decided yet. Darius jumped up and stepped toward her. Kiki, please. Understand. This was just a stupid mistake. We didn't want to hurt you. We just needed the money. Money is always needed, she interrupted. But normal people earn it. They don't steal it from their wives. He fell silent standing, with his hands down, his face etched with complete despair. Somewhere deep down, Kiana felt a faint pang of pity, but it was just a faint, very faint pang. Go to bed, she said tiredly. We'll talk in the morning. In the morning? Yes, in the morning.
I'll
Tell you what I've decided. For now, go. Darius nodded, stunned, and shuffled off to the bedroom. Kiana remained standing in the kitchen, looking out the window. Dawn was breaking outside. The gray pre-dawn sky showed through the darkness. The city was waking up slowly, reluctantly. Darius's phone vibrated again in the
hallway.
Kiana walked out and picked it up from the floor. Another message from Ms. Sterling. Darius, they're
Questioning me.
They're saying this is attempted felony theft. What should I do? Kiana smirked and put the phone back
Down.
Let Darius deal with his mother himself. She had played her part.
She
Returned to the kitchen and sat by the window. Street lights were on, even though the sky was already light. A few pedestrians hurried about their business. A truck rumbled in the distance. An ordinary morning, only for her. This day was a turning point. Kiana pulled her phone from her robe pocket and texted her friend Shauna. Hey, can I come over today? I need to talk.
The
Reply came almost instantly. Of course, what happened? I'll tell you when I see
you.
I'll be over around 10 o'clock. Kiana put her phone away and leaned back in her chair. Inside, she was calm.
Not
Happy, not sad, just calm, like after a long illness. When the crisis has passed, and all that remains is to wait for recovery. She had lived with Darius for 5 years. 5 years of hope, habit, and
compromise.
5 years of the illusion that everything would somehow work out.
But
Now the illusions were gone. Only facts remained. Fact 1. Her husband and his mother planned to steal her money. Fact 2. They didn't feel a shred of remorse. Fact 3. That means it's over. Kiana stood up and walked to the window. The sky outside the glass had completely brightened, tinged with pale
pink.
A beautiful sunrise. Too bad it followed such a vile night. Something crashed in the bedroom. Darius apparently couldn't sleep and was tossing and turning. Kiana listened closely. Then muffled sobs reached her. He was crying. She scoffed. Self-pity. That's all he was capable of. Not pity for her or for their broken marriage, but for himself. Kiana returned to the kitchen and began packing a bag, documents, keys, phone, charger, all the essentials. She wouldn't be staying with Shauna for long, maybe 3 days, until she figured out her next move. The apartment was hers, purchased before the marriage with her grandmother's money, so she wouldn't have to kick Darius out. He would leave on his own, or his mother would take him, and they would see after
that.
Around 8 o'clock, she heard the alarm clock ring in the bedroom. Darius got up and went to the bathroom. Water ran from the tap. Kiana sat in the kitchen drinking her second cup of tea and looking out the window. Darius came out about 20 minutes later, dressed but rumpled with red eyes and a drawn face. He sat down opposite her and poured himself coffee from the French press she had made. Kiki, he began quietly, I messed up. I know. Please forgive me. Please. She remained silent.
It was a
Mistake. A terrible, Idiotic mistake. Mom talked me into it. I wasn't thinking, but I never wanted to betray you. Honestly, Darius, she cut him off.
Calmly.
You dictated the pin to your mother and told her to take all my money. That is the definition of betrayal, the real thing. He gripped the mug with both hands, staring into the darkness of the coffee. What are you going to do? I don't know. I'll probably file for divorce. He flinched.
Divorce, Kiki.
Wait, let's talk this through. I'll change.
I swear.
She shook her head. You won't change. You are who you are, and your mother is who she is. I don't need a family that sees me as a cash cow. Darius opened his mouth to object, but then his phone vibrated again. He snatched it, looked at the screen, and palled dead. Mom, he whispered. She's calling. Kiana nodded. Answer it. He pressed the button and put the phone to his ear. Hello, Mom. Where are you? Miss Sterling's voice was hysterical and
loud.
Kiana heard every word. Darius, they kept me at the bank for 3 hours.
3
hours of questioning me like a criminal. They said they could send the documents to the police. This is all your wife. She set this up on purpose. Darius was silent, clutching the phone with white knuckles. Are you listening?
To me?
She framed us. She purposely changed the PIN and left that cursed card with the $3. She knew we'd try to take the money. Mom, calm down.
Calm down.
Darius tried to interrupt her. I'll come over right now. We'll talk. Don't come over.
Just tell that.
Snake not to file a report. Do you hear me? Tell her not to file one. Kiana listened, not taking her eyes off the window. Her mother-in-law's voice sounded pitiful and spiteful at the same
time.
She was screaming, accusing, demanding intervention. Mom, calm down. Darius tried to talk over her. I'll be right there. You don't need to come over. Just tell your precious wife not to file a report. I was only released because she hasn't filed a statement yet, but they said if she does, I'll be
charged.
Kiana stood up, walked to the table, and held out her hand. Give me the phone. Darius looked at her fearfully, but handed over the phone. Kiana held it to her ear. Miss Sterling.
Hello.
She choked mid-sob. This is all your fault. I'm at fault for protecting my own money. Kiana chuckled. Interesting logic. You set us up on purpose. You set yourselves up when you decided to steal my money. I simply took precautions. I didn't mean to steal. It was a misunderstanding. Of course, Kiana said calmly, almost mockingly. You just accidentally drove to the ATM. Late at night with my card and my PIN.
A pure coincidence.
Miss Sterling gasped. With indignation. You're heartless. My social security is small. I have nothing to live on, and you have over 100,000 just sitting there. You could have helped. I could have, Kiana agreed. If you had asked me like a human being, instead you tried to rob me in the middle of the night, conspiring with my husband. Silence. Then her mother-in-law spoke softer, almost pleadingly. Kiki, please don't file a report. I beg you. I'll never ever do this again. Just don't file it. Kiana was silent, considering whether to file or not.
On
the one hand, she wanted to teach this brazen woman a lesson to show that not everything is forgiven. On the other, dealing with the police, investigations, statements, was it worth the hassle? Fine, she said finally. I won't file a report, but on one condition. What is it? You and Darius never appear in my life again. No calls, no visits, no
requests.
I'm filing for divorce, settling everything quickly and quietly. And you both disappear forever. Ms. Sterling sniffled. Okay, whatever you say. Just don't file the report. We have a deal. Kiana disconnected the call and handed the phone back to Darius. He took it with trembling hands, looking at her forlornly. You're really not going to file a report?
I'm not, she answered. But on
the condition that you move out of here today, take your things and leave, and never come back. He nodded without looking up. I understand. Kiana turned and walked into the bedroom to collect her bag. Behind her, she heard him stand up, walk to the room, and begin stuffing his things into plastic bags. Half an hour later, he stood in the hallway with two suitcases, pale and defeated. Kiki, he said softly.
I'm sorry. I
Really didn't mean it. She raised her hand, stopping him. Don't just go.
He
Nodded, opened the door, and left. The door closed quietly, almost soundlessly. Kiana remained standing in the entryway, staring at the closed door. Inside, she felt empty. Not pain, not sadness, just emptiness, like after a long illness. When the fever has broken and only weakness remains, she went back to the kitchen and sat by the window. Outside, the wind was rustling, chasing gray clouds across the sky. The day promised
to be gloomy.
Kiana pulled out her phone and texted Shauna. Changed my mind, not coming over. Everything sorted itself out. The reply came almost immediately. Are you okay? I'm great. She put her phone away and looked out the window. Life was going on. People rushed to work. Buses rattled at the stops. Children laughed somewhere in the distance. An ordinary day, the first day of her new life. Kiana smiled faintly, but genuinely. Now she knew for certain. Justice doesn't always come through the police or through revenge. Sometimes it comes on its own through $3 on a card, a mother's greed, and her own foresight. The morning after Darius left was surprisingly quiet. Kiana woke up late around 10 o'clock and immediately felt an unfamiliar lightness. The apartment was empty. The silence was so thick she could hear the pigeons cooing on the windowsill outside. She got up and walked through the rooms. Darius's absence was palpable everywhere. His jacket wasn't hanging on the hook in the entryway. His sneakers were gone from under the dresser. His shaving gear wasn't scattered in the bathroom. Even the smell of his cologne had faded. Kiana stopped by the living room window and looked down into the courtyard. Kids were playing soccer between the garages. A woman with a stroller walked slowly along the path. An old man was walking a dachshund. Ordinary life in which her personal drama meant absolutely nothing. She went back to the kitchen, brewed coffee, and sat at the table. She needed to think, plan, and decide what to do. Next, file for divorce. Change the locks, just in case. Though Darius had left the keys on the nightstand, erase 5 years of her life as if they hadn't happened. But for some reason,
she didn't want to think.
She just wanted to sit, drink hot coffee, and watch the clouds drift past the window. The phone rang around noon. It was Shauna. Kiana pressed the green button. Hello, Kiki. Why are you silent? What happened yesterday?
You texted that.
Everything worked out, and then you disappeared. Kiana smiled.
Sorry, I
didn't have the energy to explain. Well, explain now. I'm going crazy with curiosity. Kiana sighed and began telling the story briefly without
unnecessary detail.
Shauna listened silently, occasionally gasping. When Kiana finished, her friend exhaled slowly. Well, I'll be both the mother and the son. But now it doesn't matter. The main thing is that it's over.
It's
over. All right. Kiki, are you filing for divorce? Of course. I'll go to the county clerk's office next week to find out what I need.
And he won't fight it.
Kiana shook her head, although Shauna couldn't see her. He won't.
He's
probably relieved I didn't file a report on his mother. So, we'll settle everything quickly and quietly. Listen, how are you feeling right now? You're there all alone. You must be sad.
Kiana thought about it.
You know, surprisingly, I'm not sad. I feel relief. More like a weight lifted off my shoulders. For 5 years, I lived with the feeling that something was wrong. And now, I realize it wasn't me who was wrong. It was him and his mother.
Shauna
was silent for a moment, then said gently, Come over tonight. We'll have tea and talk. It's lonely sitting there by yourself. Thanks. I'll come. After the call, Kiana got dressed and went out. She needed to walk, clear her head, and distract herself from her
Thoughts.
She wandered through familiar streets, looking at store windows and watching people. Everything seemed new, as if she were looking at the world with fresh eyes. She lingered in the bookstore for about 20 minutes, flipping through new releases and bought a mystery novel and a collection of short stories. She had been wanting to read something light and unstressful for a long time.
As she stepped outside, she
Bumped into her neighbor, Ms. Mabel. She lived one floor up and was known throughout the building for her love of gossip. Kiki, hello, Ms. Mabel, beamed, pressing her hand to her chest. Haven't seen you in a while.
How are you?
How's your husband? Kiana smiled.
Politely.
Hello, Ms. Mabel. Everything's fine, thank you. Well, I saw Darius leaving with bags yesterday. Did you two have a fight? There it is, Kiana held back a sigh. The gossip would spread through the building at the speed of light. We're getting divorced, she said calmly. We just didn't work out. Ms. Mabel gasped. Oh my goodness. And I thought you two were such a strong couple, young and attractive. It happens, Kiana shrugged. It's nothing terrible. Life goes on. She said goodbye and walked on, feeling the neighbor's curious gaze on her back. By evening, the entire apartment building would know that the Bells were divorcing.
Let them.
She didn't care. That evening, she did go to Shauna's place. Her friend greeted her with open arms, sat her down in the kitchen, and brewed aromatic thyme tea. Tell me everything from the beginning, Shauna demanded, settling down opposite her. And don't even think about holding anything back. Kiana told the story, detailing every event without rushing. Shauna listened, mouth agape, and at the end simply shook her head.
Wow.
You're such a star, Kiki. I would have screamed and called the police immediately. And you calculated everything so calmly and outmaneuvered them. I didn't outmaneuver them. I just took precautions. You're a genius. Shauna laughed. $3 on the card. That's
Classic.
I can just imagine how your mother-in-law reacted when they cornered her at the bank. Kiana smirked.
It was.
Funny to picture. All right. You know, I'm not even angry at them, she confessed. More like pity. It's a shame I wasted 5 years on a person capable of
That.
Shauna reached across the table and covered her hand with hers.
Don't.
Regret it. 5 years isn't forever. The important thing is that you realized it in time and left. Some people live with folks like that their whole lives and suffer. Kiana nodded. Shauna was right. The main thing was that she hadn't closed her eyes, endured it, or forgiven him. She just left. And that was the right thing to do. They stayed up until midnight talking about nonsense. Work. Vacation plans. The new series Shauna was binging. Kiana listened, laughed, drank tea with honey, and felt the tension of the past few days gradually melt away. She got home late. The apartment greeted her with silence and darkness. Kiana turned on the light, walked through the rooms. Everything was in place. Everything was calm. She went to bed, and for the first time in several weeks fell asleep immediately without anxious thoughts or nightmares. The following week, Kiana took a day off and went to the county clerk's office. Filing for divorce turned out to be surprisingly simple. Darius didn't object. He even showed up without a reminder, signed all the papers in silence, and left without saying goodbye. Kiana watched him walk away and felt nothing. No pity, no anger, no regret, just an emptiness that wasn't oppressive or tormenting, but rather liberating. A month later, the divorce was finalized. Kiana received the certificate, put it in her document folder, and breathed a sigh of relief. That was it. Period. A new chapter in her life. In November, she signed up for English language courses. She had long wanted to brush up on her skills, but never had the time. Now she had time to
spare.
In the evenings, she sat with her textbooks, listened to podcasts, and watched movies in English with subtitles. In December, something pleasant happened at work. Her boss called her into his office and offered her a promotion. The senior accountant was going on maternity leave, and they needed a replacement. "Kiona, you're our most responsible and competent person," he said, tapping his pen on the desk. "Can you handle it?" Kiona smiled. "Of course I can." The promotion meant a raise and more responsibility, but Kiona wasn't afraid. On the contrary, she wanted to dive into work head first to fill the void that sometimes still made itself known. By the new year, the apartment was transformed. Kiana finally started the kitchen renovation she had dreamed of. She hired a crew, chose cabinets and appliances. The process was slow with mishaps and delays, but she didn't get stressed. She had endless patience now. In late December, Shauna called and invited her to an office holiday party. "Kiki, how long are you going to stay home? Come on, let's have some fun. My coworkers will be there. Some great people. Meet some folks. Take your mind off things." Kiana initially refused, but Shauna was persistent. Eventually, she agreed. The party was loud and fun. Kiana sat at a table drinking champagne and listening to Shauna's colleagues swap office anecdotes. One of them, Michael, a tall man in his 40s with a kind face and pleasant eyes, sat next to her and started a conversation. "Shauna tells me, you're an accountant," he asked, smiling. "I respect that. I'm terrible with numbers." Kiana chuckled. "It's just a matter of practice." They talked all evening. Michael turned out to be an engineer who worked at a design firm, and he enjoyed hiking and photography. He told interesting stories with a sense of humor, and Kiana found herself relaxing and even laughing several times. At the end of the evening, he asked cautiously, "Can I call you if you don't mind?" "Of course." Kiana paused. She wasn't looking for a relationship. She hadn't even thought about it. "But why not?" "You can," she replied. "I don't mind." He smiled, and there was something warm and genuine in his expression. They called each other a week later, met at a cafe, talked, and walked through a snow-covered park. Michael was an attentive listener and an interesting conversationalist. Kiana briefly told him about her divorce. He nodded understandingly. "I'm divorced too," he admitted. 3 years ago. It was hard at first, but then I realized it was for the best. Life got better. It was easier to breathe." Kiana smiled. So she wasn't the only one who felt that way. They continued to meet once a week, no more often, unhurriedly, without pressure, without commitment, just enjoying spending time together. In January, an unexpected encounter happened at work. Kiana was standing at the coffee machine in the hallway when a group of people stepped out of the elevator. Miss Sterling was among them. Kiana froze. Her mother-in-law noticed. Her too stopped and turned pale. They stared at each other for a few seconds. Then Miss Sterling abruptly turned away and hurried toward the exit. Kiana watched her go and smirked. Apparently, the mother-in-law had come to see an acquaintance or for business and certainly hadn't planned on running into her former daughter-in-law. Kiana poured her coffee and returned to her office. She felt calm inside with no desire to argue or make accusations. All of that was in the past and she didn't want to go back there. That same evening, Darius called. Kiana stared at the name on the screen for a long time. Then she finally answered. "Yes, Darius." "Hello."
Kiki.
"Hi, it's me." "I hear you. What do you need?" A pause. He clearly hadn't expected such a cold tone. "I wanted to talk. Can we go ahead?" Another pause. "I'm living with Mom in her one-bedroom condo. We're cramped. Very cramped. We're fighting all the time. She nags me every day, saying everything went wrong because of me. She says if I hadn't gotten involved in that card thing, we'd be living normally right now." Kiana laughed quietly. "And what do you want me to say? That I pity you?" "No, I just wanted you to know. I'm having a hard time. A really hard time." "Darius, I'm sorry to hear that, of course, but that was your choice. You chose your mother and her greed. Now you have to live with the consequences. He sighed heavily. Will you ever forgive me? Forgive? Kiana considered. Maybe someday she would forgive when enough time had passed and the pain had completely dulled. But she didn't want to forgive
Him now.
I don't know, Darius. Possibly, but definitely not now. And even if I forgive you, we won't get back together. That's impossible. I understand. He spoke quietly, almost a whisper. Forgive me for everything. She didn't answer, just disconnected the call and put the phone on the table. Darius didn't call again. February brought news from Shauna. Her friend called one evening, excited and joyful.
Kiki, listen.
Remember my cousin Tammy? She's a realtor. Well, she says they've listed your old streets two-bedroom condo. Darius and his mother are trying to sell her apartment and split up. Couldn't live together, apparently.
Kiana burst out laughing.
Seriously? Absolutely. Tammy says they're demanding a crazy high price, but no one's buying. The condo is old. The building's shaky. So they're still sitting there arguing. Kiona shook her head. So, they hadn't been able to coexist after all.
Greed
And mutual blame had done their work. Well, let them, she said calmly.
I
Don't care. And it was true. She really didn't care. Darius and Miss Sterling were in the past, and she didn't want to stir up that past. Spring came surprisingly early. By March, streams were running, the first grass was greening, and buds were opening on the trees. Kiana went to work with a light heart, met Michael, studied English, and read books. Life was improving. Not immediately, not all at once, but gradually. Day by day, she learned to wake up without anxiety and fall asleep without heavy thoughts. She learned to find joy in small things. A morning cup of coffee, a good book, the warm spring wind. In April, the kitchen renovation was finished. Kiana stood in the middle of the updated space and looked around with satisfaction. Bright cabinets, new appliances, convenient storage. Everything turned out exactly as she had dreamed. She invited Shauna over for a housewarming party. Her friend came with a bottle of wine and a bouquet of tulips. Kiki, this is gorgeous, Shauna exclaimed, examining the kitchen. It looks like something out of a magazine. They sat late into the night talking, laughing, and reminiscing about the past. Shauna suddenly asked, Listen, do you ever regret how things turned out with Darius? Kiana thought about it, looking into her glass of wine. You know, sometimes I regret the wasted time, but I don't regret leaving.
If I
Had stayed, it would have only gotten worse. They would have bled me dry for the rest of my days. But now I'm free. Shauna nodded. You did the right thing. You're strong. Not every woman would have decided to act like that. Kiana smiled. I just realized one thing in time. You can't live with people who see you as a wallet, not a person. You can't forgive betrayal, even if it's your husband, even if you feel bad about the years you spent. Shauna raised her glass.
to you,
Kiki, to your strength and wisdom. They clinked glasses and Kiana felt something inside quietly, finally healing. A week later, Miss Mabel called her. Kiana was surprised. The neighbor usually didn't call. She just cornered her in the hallway to gossip. Kiki, hello. Listen, I just saw your ex.
he
Was standing near the convenience store asking for a cigarette. He didn't look so good, aged, drawn. Kiana politely thanked her for the information and hung up. She didn't feel sorry for Darius. He had chosen his own path. Now he had to walk it. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. Spring had fully arrived. The trees were covered with young leaves. Kids were riding bikes in the courtyard.
someone was
Planting flowers in a bed. Life continued ordinary, simple, without drama or betrayal. And that was wonderful. Michael called that evening and suggested they drive out of town on the weekend to see an old historic plantation and walk through the park. Kiana gladly accepted. They drove out on Saturday. The plantation was beautiful and well-maintained with a pond and centuries-old oak trees. They walked slowly, talking and laughing. Michael told stories from his hiking trips and showed her photographs. Kiana listened, thinking how easy it was to be with him. No tension, no unspoken words, just warmth and calm. On the way back, Michael suddenly asked, "Kiana, have you thought about the future? About what happens in a year or two?" She looked out the window at the fields and groves flashing by. "I've thought about it, but I don't make concrete plans. I live for
Today.
it's simpler and calmer." He nodded wisely. They fell silent, and the silence was light and comfortable. By summer, Kiana had fully settled into her new position. Work was going well. Her boss praised her, and her colleagues respected her. She even considered signing up for advanced certification courses. She wanted to keep moving, keep growing, not stand still. In June, Shauna brought news again. "Listen,
Tammy.
says Darius and his mother finally sold the condo for next to nothing, of course, but they sold it. They split up. He's renting a room somewhere on the outskirts. She moved in with her sister in the country. They never managed to split anything. They just had one final massive fight." Kiana smiled.
Justice. Prevailed then. Yep.
Shauna nodded. "You know that saying, you reap what you sow." They sowed greed and deceit, and that's what they harvested. Kiana finished her tea and looked out the window. Outside, the bright summer sun was shining, birds were singing, and flowers were blooming in the garden. Justice really doesn't always come through the police. Sometimes it comes through $3 on a card, a mother's greed, and her own foresight. And then life sorts everything out itself. Kiana smiled.
She
Was free, happy, and calm. Summer was ahead of her with new plans and new opportunities. The past stayed exactly where it belonged in the past.
She
Stood up, walked to the window, and opened it wide. Fresh air rushed into the room, bringing with it the scent of cut grass and warm asphalt. Life continued, and it was beautiful. Looking back now, I realize something simple but powerful.
Peace.
Begins when you stop letting the wrong people live rent-free in your heart.
I
Thought losing my husband would break me, but it actually set me free.
Life.
Has a funny way of rewarding those who choose self-respect over comfort.
Today.
I wake up grateful, not bitter. I smile because I finally learned that protecting your boundaries isn't selfish, it's self-love. And I hope my story reminds you of that, too. If you agree with me and enjoyed my story, show it by giving this video a like. Let's see how many of us there are. I'm curious. Where are you watching from, and what time is it there? Write it in the comments. If you'd like to support my journey, you can send me a small donation. Thank you for listening and sharing your precious time with me. For more life stories like this, check out the other videos on my channel and
Subscribe.
I've added 2 new ones on the screen that I'm sure you'll love. Click on one and start listening with.